The Kia Stonic may not look any different, but there have been some important changes made to this updated version. It's got a new engine, it's got new safety tech, and well, the prices have gone up. But in this review, I'll tell you what you need to know about it, including the best alternatives to the Kia Stonic. So if you haven't already, please ring the bell to keep up to date with all of my content. And let's take a look, shall we? Just like before, there are three versions of the Kia Stonic available in Australia. The entry-level model is called the S, and it now gets a few extra features to make it look a little bit nicer from the outside. It gets alloy wheels. It used to have steel wheels with hubcaps, but now it gets alloys and it looks, well, slightly better from the outside. It still gets halogen headlights and halogen daytime running lights, which is not great. And on the inside, you've got cloth trim with manual seat adjustment. There's a decent sized touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And there's also a new look digital instrument display as well for the driver. And that entry-level model also gets new heated folding side mirrors, and front parking sensors are standard now as well. I'll tell you a bit more about the safety spec inclusions because there have been some improvements over the previous version in a couple of sections time. Now, this version here is called the Sport. It does look a little bit sportier on the outside. It does get the 17-inch alloy wheels, so 2 inches bigger than the other version below it. Front fog lights, and on the inside it adds sat-nav to the equation, but in the entry-level version you get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. In this one you have to plug in because it doesn't work with the sat-nav. They don't play ball together. So I think that could be a consideration for you, maybe. But at the top of the range is the one that I reviewed last time, the GT line. It still looks very much the same as it did. It gets things like full LED headlights and daytime running lights, and that does make a difference in terms of the night driving factor because, it's important to be able to see where you're going at night. And on the inside, it's got different interior trim too. So the GT line for me just stacks up as a really good choice if you can afford to spend the extra money to get into it. But I've got some really good value alternatives that you might want to consider. Righto, if you're shopping for an entry-level version of the Kia Stonic, well, you might want to go and take a look at a Hyundai Venue as well. It is a slightly better proportioned car in terms of the interior space for the size of that vehicle. I don't think it's necessarily better to drive or anything like that. It's got a pretty lethargic engine, but it does have space on its side, and it is a practical, well-priced option if you aren't so sold on this car in particular. If you're shopping at the higher spec versions of the Kia Stonic, well, I reckon you should go and take a look at the Skoda Kamiq. It's just a few $1,000s more than this sport version of the Kia Stonic, but it does have European flair to it. It's got a 7-year warranty, just like this car, but it also has a thrummy 3-cylinder turbo petrol engine in the base grade. And while it is missing a couple of features that you might want, it does have a much nicer interior, in my opinion. And finally, if you are also in that higher end market, the Volkswagen T-Cross is one you should go and check out. The updated version of it is about $35,000 for the base grade. And I know that's quite a lot of money for a little car, but that thing does things brilliantly because it is very little, but it has big practicality on the inside. It's also got a nice upmarket feel to the interior and a sliding second row seat to make the boot bigger if you want, or to prioritize passenger space. It's very, very practical, very smart, and well sized as well. Would you pick any of those? Would you choose something different? Let me know in the comments. The Stonic is about 4.1 meters in length, so it is a pretty small car compared to some of the other vehicles in this small SUV segment. And in fact, I think that it looks smart still. I'm just not sold on this whole hanging on to the idea of halogen headlights and halogen daytime running lights. They're just so dull and they don't work as well at nighttime. It's disappointing that Kia didn't decide to upgrade the Stonic with better light technology for the lower spec versions. People who drive cheap cars still need to be able to see at night, and people who are walking on the street still need to be able to see cheap cars, in my opinion. All right, so let's have a look at the back end. Nothing's really changed in terms of the design, but it's still a well-proportioned little high-riding hatch thingy. So let's have a look in the boot and see how much space there is to play with. Okay, so you can see for yourself that that is a pretty decent sized boot for a little car like this. It does have some pretty handy features in the back too. So on this side, there's like a little contraband hidey hole there. And on this side, you've got a light and a shopping bag hook. Oh, there's a shopping bag hook on that side as well. And down here, well, the floor is one of those more flimsy options, but there is a space saver spare underneath. So that is a bonus. And I guess you could put this floor up. No, you can't. You can't. It does have the provisions to do so, but no, that's flimsy. So anyway, put it in its lowest position and you'll be happy anyway. But it's kind of strange that they've got the provisions there to put a harder floor covering section in there, but we don't get that obviously. Oh, one other thing, there's a little shopping bag hook underneath the parcel shelf too. So that adds extra practicality. I like that. Okay, so some of the other rivals in this class do have a bit more bling on the inside, big screens and all the flashiness that you might expect, but this car has a bit better functionality in terms of the technology and gear on the inside. So you do now have a digital instrument display. It's got digital speed, which is good, and a digital rev counter as well. And there are some menus on the trip computer that you can cycle through using the controls on the steering wheel. Those controls, very simple to get used to. A nice steering wheel as well with leather on it in this spec. And you also get this touchscreen media system. As I mentioned, you've got sat-nav built in, and that is handy to have if you're the sort of person who likes using inbuilt maps, but I'm more often using Apple CarPlay and the Google Maps system. So it is pretty good in terms of the tech. Yes, you do have to plug in to use the Apple CarPlay in this particular grade. The entry-level one, as I said, does get wireless Apple CarPlay, but it doesn't get sat-nav. So I'm sure you'll make up your own mind as to what you prefer. What I like about it is that you do get dials here. You've got buttons down below. All of this is tactile and simple to use, and there's not too much to go through in terms of the actual screen itself. So if you are au fait with Apple CarPlay and you just plug in your phone every single time, you'll be happy, I'm sure, in one of these higher spec versions. But yeah, there's other little things that you might want to pay attention to. I like this menu layout, and you can adjust things if you want to, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure you'll figure it out if you're interested. Now, you've got climate control in this car as well, as I said, so it's single zone with dials. I like that you get dials here as well. I'm a bit of a dials guy, in case you didn't notice. And I mean, there's a couple of buttons down below, recirc and your demisters front and rear, and also the direction control for the airflow. It's a rather conventional looking T-bar shifter. There's a drive mode controller down there. Yep, you've got drive modes in this car. There's a little shelf above that USB port down there. And yes, I've got my phone plugged in down there. All of those things, pretty handy. 12-volt port there as well, but it's not necessarily that special in terms of the storage. Got some cup holders here, manual handbrake, fun, and also a decent sized center console bin. There are some things I want to call out. Sorry if the rain's a little bit noisy, just started, that you do miss out on. You don't get an auto dimming rear vision mirror, and you do get these vanity mirrors with little lights that you have to turn on to use. So that's something. And there's a sunglasses holder up there as well. I know some people love that. The cloth trim, I think it's okay. It's not necessarily overly special looking or feeling, but hey, I think it's good enough. But what isn't good enough are these scratchy plastics where your elbows sit. All that is hard plastic. And if you're the sort of person who likes to rest their elbows on the door when they're driving, yes, that gets uncomfortable. Down there's also a decent sized set of bottle holders too. And yeah, I think that for the most part, it doesn't feel special, doesn't feel blingy, but it does the practicality thing pretty well, this car. So let's check out the back seat and see what it's like. Righto, so the back seat, yeah, my knees are hard up against the seat in front. I'm 6 foot tall, 182 centimeters, yeah. I've got a little bit of toe wiggle room, but knees very much firmly against my driver's seat position. So if you've got tall teens, it might not be the ideal car for you and your needs, but in terms of headspace, it's actually pretty good. So yeah, I've got a bit of room above my head. There's a grab handle, there's a coat hook up there as well. And there is a light, but it's sort of in the middle here. So you don't get map lights in the back or anything like that. And you're missing a few other features as well in the back. You don't get a map pocket on this seat, but you do get one on that seat. You don't get directional vents, but you do get a USB-A port. There is a slight transmission tunnel intrusion down there. There is a pair of bottle holders in the doors, but there's no flip down armrest in this seat. But you do get ISOFIX points in the window seats and 3 top tethers as well. So, I mean, it's going to be good enough for some people's needs, but maybe not everyone's. And same story back here. Scratchy, hard, plasticky stuff that doesn't really feel very nice. But otherwise, I guess you could make it work for a small family, or if you've got young kids, it might be fine. Nice to see that Kia Australia has finally added the 1 litre turbo petrol 3-cylinder engine across the entire range. Previously, it was only available in the GT line, and those who bought the cheaper models had to make do with the far less impressive 1.4 litre engine and 6-speed auto. But now all of them are this 1 litre triple with turbocharged power, and you can see the power and torque figures on your screen now. It's a pretty good engine, I have to say. It comes as standard with a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission, which takes some learning, and it's front wheel drive as standard as well. Now let's go for a drive and see what it's like. Okay, let's go for a drive in this little Stonic. Now we're starting off in normal drive mode because, I mean, that's probably what you'll be driving in. And I think it's actually the best balance in this car. It is kind of strange to have drive modes in a car that's this cheap because in theory you don't really need them. If you've tuned the engine and transmission well enough, you shouldn't really need to have drive modes, but maybe it's just a great selling point in the showroom. But let's stop here and let me just actually come to a complete stop. It's got engine start stop technology, this little turbo petrol, so it's just kicked back to life. Now I'll just put my foot down and see how we go here. Yeah, actually that's not bad. We might just replicate it down here and see if we can find out if there's any difference on this slight slope. All right, let's do this right here. We'll come to a complete stop once more so we can see what happens. Complete stop. Yep, engine start stop. Okay, so let's see how this goes. Taking off from a standstill, and I'll put my foot pretty much flat to the floor. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so yeah, you will need to get used to that. And I think the fact that it's got Continental tires does help it get the power down because it doesn't necessarily spin the front tires very easily. I know it's not a hugely torquey engine, so it shouldn't spin the tires easily, but in some other vehicles with this sort of engine transmission combo, that can be an issue. But this seems to be pretty balanced in the way that it behaves itself. But let's put it into sport mode and see if it misbehaves then. So left here. Okay, come on. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I mean, you will get used to it. It's not a sporty car to drive. It does have ample power and torque, I would say, for this sort of application. But yeah, you just need to be mindful of the fact that it's got a dual clutch and they do behave a little bit differently to some other transmissions out there. If you are just going to be doing the distance trip to work and back, you're going to rejoice in the fact that there is none of that super annoying high-tech safety stuff like speed sign monitoring to interrupt your drive. And there is a lane keeping system, but it's very easy to turn off. You just hold the button down on the steering wheel and it will disable. But otherwise, I think that it's got sort of like a European-ish feel to the drive experience, much more than some cheap Chinese vehicles out there that you might be cross-shopping, because it's just got this sort of planted feel. It's slightly firm in terms of the ride over little lumps and bumps in the surface, but the general body control and comfort is good. And I mean, for country road driving, I've driven this car in the country before, and it does do a pretty good job at loping along on those bumpier roads pretty well. The steering too is very good. It's nice and accurate with a decent amount of weight, and it's kind of direct too, so it doesn't take much guesswork in terms of just trying to switch direction in corners, or if you are going on more of a fun drive. I don't think this is a fun car to drive, but I do think that it is fun enough, and it's zesty enough with this 3-cylinder engine. I drove the existing version of this car with the 1.4 litre engine and the 6-speed auto, and it was dull. This is not dull. This is good. This is much better. So other things you want to keep in mind, well, you know, if you were buying an MG or a Cherry, you might get a surround view camera as standard. You don't in this car. You do get a reversing camera. It's not a bad camera system, but it's good that they've now got front and rear parking sensors on this car, because that does make a difference for a city car like this. On the whole, I am giving this a bit of a tick. I think it's a nice car to drive and a nice engine as well compared to the existing one. So what about fuel consumption? Is it improved? All right, on your screen, you'll see the official combined cycle fuel consumption figure for the Kia Stonic lineup, and it's decent, I would say. I think if you can achieve that kind of number, you'll be very happy. Now, this car hasn't necessarily done heaps of Ks, so it might not fully be run in yet, but the number that I've seen is still pretty impressive. You'll see it on your screen now, and that's across a mix of driving, including highway commuting, some stop-start stuff, the daily errands, all of that sort of stuff that I do with my test cars when I'm at home. And it can run on regular unleaded petrol. You don't need to fill it up with premium, which might be a good thing for you. And it's got a pretty decent sized fuel tank too. Nice. The Stonic achieved the maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating several years ago, and actually it wasn't the Stonic that achieved the score, it was the Rio hatchback that this car's based on, and they didn't retest it to show whether this SUV-ified version of it is the same sort of performer. But hey, 5 stars, if that matters to you, fine. But the standard safety tech is improved, although not spectacular. You do get autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian cyclist detection, and there's also a lane keeping assistance function. You get blind spot monitoring as standard across the range now. Front and rear parking sensors and a reversing camera are all standard as well, but standard is just plain old cruise control, no adaptive cruise control, so that might be a deal breaker for some who do long distance commutes and like the reliability of cruise control that does the distance thing for you. And also, there are 6 airbags fitted in this car, dual front, front side, and full length curtain coverage. Kia Australia offers a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty, and for a lot of people in Australia, that's the reason that Kia has become one of the go-to brands. There are other brands that offer 7 years of warranty now as well, but it was the first, and let me tell you, it's helped this brand out a lot in this market. But there's one thing you need to know about that warranty. You sort of do have to pay for it. In terms of the ownership costs, like the servicing costs for this car, pretty high. It requires maintenance every 12 months and 10,000 kilometers, so it's a bit more needy than other small SUVs on the budget end of things. And it works out to be kind of expensive to own this car, especially if you do a lot of kilometers. You'll notice that the average service cost on your screen now, that's high. And remember, that's every 10,000 Ks. So yeah, it could add up. But you do get roadside assist included if you decide to go for a Kia Stonic and you service through their network. What do you think? This updated version of the Stonic is an improvement on the previous one. The 3-cylinder turbo petrol across the range makes a big difference, and the additional spec and safety tech certainly does as well. But when it comes to, well, budget SUVs, there's plenty of choice out there, and you might have noticed I didn't call out any of the cheap Chinese ones in my best alternative section. There's a reason for that. I don't think any of them feel quite as accomplished as this, but there's also some really stiff competition out there. So tell me what you think. Would you choose this, one of those rivals, or a cheap Chinese one? I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.